Hi, this is Randy and welcome back. In this video, what I want to do is I just want to review our virtual machine builds and just be sure everybody's on the same page, that we've all completed all of the tasks that we needed. And so what I'm going to do is I've got a list here. I'll let you look at this, and then it scrolls down below the page here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump in and out of different virtual machines and check each of these things, and just invite you to do so with me, or to nod your head and say, yep, got that, got that, got that. That's what we're after here. We're just after that nothing's been missed and that everybody has everything in place before we move forward with further projects. So up here we've got these bulleted items that we'll talk about, and then just a couple more below it. An optional category, power management, and then just to review different console options, snapshots, and so on. So let me start by bringing up the build guide. The build guide has a lot of detail in it, and some of it can be easy to overlook. The assigned password that we're all using, we do that so that we can help each other out and work on each other's machine, but I don't want to share that in the video, and so that's gone out by email, and I've asked that you assign that to all of the default accounts that we've created. For example, on DC1 we've created a default administrator account that's actually part of the installation. Same on server 1. On Windows 10 and 11 we created admin accounts. The username was admin, not administrator. So these are the accounts that I'll use to help you troubleshoot, or to go and look at your work and verify your progress. So I need to know that we've all done that we all have the correct user account names and the correct password then that's assigned. So far we haven't done this yet. We haven't created a new account on pfSense. So far we're just using the admin account with our class password. Another thing that we want to be sure that we've all done is that everybody has installed VM tools. Now it's called different things. VMware tools. In pfSense it was called OpenVM tools. When we install Linux, it'll have its own. Okay, so we haven't installed all these yet. We haven't installed the LNX Box Linux, and we haven't installed the RTR, which RTR is just another installation of pfSense, except we're using the routing function of pfSense and not the firewall function. Okay. So we need to have VM tools installed. One thing that's easy to overlook is the different hard drives on the different data stores. Now your screenshot in some of your earlier assignments, they ask you to verify this. So if you had any trouble with your iSCSI or NFS store, then you would want to fix that and get those second hard drives. Data Store 1 and Data Store 2 are real straightforward and easy to create our virtual hard drives on. But if you ran into trouble with iSCSI, and the second hard drive for DC1 is on iSCSI, the second hard drive for NFS, for server 1 is on NFS. Okay. So just looking at the build guide, RAM, CPU, network cards, things like that, those are all from the build guide. Okay. We want to also be sure that everybody used their assigned addresses. And we haven't done Active Directory yet in DNS, and that's coming up. In the naming, then you're assigned, you'll be delegated a sub-child or a subdomain of bobstaco.com, a child domain. So for example, the parent domain is bobstaco.com, and that's a registered domain that that site owns and that we manage, or that I manage. And what I do then is I assign you a domain below that. So AK is a subdomain or a child domain of bobstaco.com, and you'll be responsible for that. You'll install, based on your state ID, your 2-character ID, you'll install DNS support for that. You'll create certificates around that. So we haven't done that yet, but we just want to be sure that you've identified, or you're comfortable with your designation. Also want to be sure that when you created CorpNet and you assigned your IPs, that you used your correct CorpNet ID, both for IPv4 and for IPv6. We haven't done DevNet yet. That's coming up. On PF1, this would have had to have been correct if you have internet connectivity. Now, there is a chance that you could have used the wrong one. You could have used someone else's. So just double check and verify that you're using your particular assigned IPv4 and IPv6 address. Let's go back in and look at our notes and see what we've covered. OS versions, they should be for the Windows machines, they should be Data Center Edition, Graphical Data Center Edition on DC1 and Server 1. For Windows 10 and Windows 11, the Enterprise Evaluation Editions. pfSense is the ISO or the build. I believe it's 2.5.2 that we provided to you. RAM, CPU, the Windows machines are in a work group. They should all be updated. And I say happy and healthy. What I'm saying then is that you've addressed any concerns. You know how when you install Windows Server, there's typically a service or two that fails to start. I mentioned that down here. These are a couple that failed to start, and to take a look at those and to address them. If you choose to leave them as failed services, that's okay, but be intentional about whatever your choice is. You'll find that in the project that these machines are under your management. You're the administrator for them. And so, if you choose, like I choose a particular wallpaper for all my machines that are under the AK domain, I've got a brown wallpaper. All my machines that are under the hi.bobstocko.com, I've got a different color. I believe it's like a pale green wallpaper. So these things are your responsibility. Of course, be responsible with the machines. Don't install software that's not related to class and that kind of stuff. Don't do any crypto mining or anything with them. Don't do anything non-class related with them. But beyond that, it's up to you. If you want to install the Chrome or Firefox web browser, things like that, things that you would choose to do if you were supporting these servers in industry, feel free to do those. So how you address these is up to you, understanding what they're for. This one, if you're just interested in what I chose to do, I chose to go ahead and change this one to manual start. And on the Microsoft Edge, that one's a little bit of a frustration for me because I do want Microsoft Edge to receive updates. And what happens is that this service runs when the server first boots and maybe periodically thereafter. It's hard to tell. But then it stops, and so it goes into a failed mode. And so for my videos and such, I went ahead and also changed it to manual start just to remove the warning from my dashboard. Snapshots. We're at a great place to take snapshots because we've got our virtuals built and we're not yet have done any configuration really to them. But it's up to you. It's very much up to you. But I just want to remind you, this is one of those things that I almost feel like a nag, but it happens just on a regular basis where a student will get backed into a corner with something not going well, and it's like, oh, if I'd have just taken a snapshot. So, but I leave it up to you. I mean, you're just actually weeks away from graduation. So these are decisions that you'll need to make and to manage. If you have questions on snapshotting or keeping them or just opinions, there's a lot that we can talk about that'll fall into the category of opinion. I like not to keep snapshots. I'll keep them while I'm working. In other words, I'll take a snapshot, I'll go do some work, I'll install DNS, DHCP, or whatever I'm going to do, Windows Update, whatever. And if everything looks good, then I'll go and I'll remove my snapshots. But then I also, in our production servers, I do backups of them. I believe we're doing nightly or twice a week or 3 times a week. I'd have to check the current schedule, but they're also getting backed up, and so that's a fallback plan. You can also export virtuals. That takes quite a bit of time, and so while we mention it, we don't often do much with it, but you can shut down the virtual, open WinSecure Copy, open SSH. Right now, SSH is open into Lab G, but not open to the internet, and that's kind of how it'll stay through the end of the semester. If you need it open to the internet, let me know, and we can open it for temporary. But you SSH in, open SSH, and then you can use WinSecure Copy and actually copy out the whole folder containing a virtual as a way to back it up, but it takes quite a bit of time. There's one thing that ESXi doesn't seem to be very good about and that's the speed at which we can move data in and out of the ESXi server. Okay, for power management, I just listed this here as a personal choice. I choose to allow the display to stay on all the time and for the virtuals not to go to sleep. Now this would just apply to the Windows machines because pfSense doesn't go to sleep. So on my Windows machines, I go into control panel and I go to power management, and like the default is that the display turns off after 10 minutes and they go to sleep after half an hour. And I choose to turn those to never, and that way I can work and bounce back and forth between virtuals and not have to keep logging in or relog in. And then when I'm done, I just shut down the virtuals. Okay. So there is as I mentioned, there's a few things that I want to show you, and I'm also being conscientious of the time. So let's jump into a virtual and just I'll move my notes out of the way and I'll jump into a virtual, and we'll just take a look at a couple of these things. I'll start by taking a look at ESXi. There's a few things we can note there. So I'll see you in a minute. So here in ESXi, I just want to show you something. We don't need to do it, and I wouldn't recommend it because of we're in a training environment, but I'd like you to see it. You can set virtuals to auto start, and you can set the order in which they start, so you can enable them, and then you can give them different time delays. So if this was a customer in a production environment, I would most likely want my firewall to come up first, and followed by my domain controller, followed by server 1, and then these guys could come up later. So there's the auto start feature. Another thing that you can do is there's some pretty good graphics with our network cards. So if we go look at CorpNet here, we get a graphical representation of CorpNet, and you can see that all these machines are connected to it, and that's pretty handy. We can take a look, we can browse our data stores. You can go and look and see that those virtual hard drives were created on your different data stores. So there's the virtual hard drive for server 1. So there's a lot. I had a comment from a YouTube. You know, these videos go out to YouTube, and people ask about some of these things about, you know, well, you didn't mention this or you didn't mention that, and there's just so much. You know, what are we doing here? We're moving forward. That's our goal. Is we've got a few more weeks in your training, and we're wanting you to move forward. And so I'm just throwing some things in there. Let me take a look next at a virtual machine. So just a reminder on these virtual machines that you've got all these different console options, and I know I mentioned this in an earlier video, just to check them out and find the ones that you like. I'm using the VRMC, which, as I mentioned, was one of my favorites here, and what I wanted to show you here was that when you install VM tools, and it's important to install VM tools, and it's easy to forget, it does create an icon in the system tray. Now normally it would be hidden, and I drag it down just to remind me that I've installed VM tools. You know, I'm thinking about the other things here, and I think pretty much we've talked about everything else. You know, I mean, ipconfig and ping and traceroute and moving a network card. Let's take a quick look at that. Moving a network card over, like for example, earlier we had virtuals. Many of us had virtuals that were over on the head 224A network. We did them there, and then you move them over to CorpNet. So pretty good there. If you haven't got that second hard drive, if you want to add that, you can add that here. You know, we added 2 network adapters when we installed pfSense. Let me take you to the setting that I do for the power that I mentioned, and this would be true on all the Windows machines. So it's here, it's in control panel, and I know, right? Windows 11 is a little bit different. So it's all still there. We talked about that earlier. It's all still there. All the same tools are in Windows 11, but the interface is a little bit different. But I'm kind of getting some smiles and a little bit of chuckles here and there just in using Windows 11 because it's kind of fun and different. It's got some cool wallpaper, and I'm finding how that, you know, instead of doing like I used to do it this way in Windows 10, I'm, you know, doing it different and a little bit different in Windows 11. But it's all still there where you can do these, and this is just a personal choice, but thought I'd show that to you. So that's in control panel, hardware and sound power, and edit power plans. Oh, you want to take a quick look at Windows 11? Okay, I'll be right back. All right, so I just jumped into my Windows 11. This time I opened a new tab versus using the VRMC, and you can see that I was last here, I was getting this screenshot for our lab or for our project assignment for Windows 11, and you know, we've just got all this stuff here which is new and different, and you can see I'm I'm getting familiar with it here. I've got my command prompt and I've got control panel, and VM tools is shown here. All right, I think that I've done what my objective was, and that was to give you a chance to, here, let me just go back to it, was just to review all this with you, because what I don't want to have happen is I don't want you to miss something and then have it come back later and cause you great difficulty. And so these are considered all fundamental things. You need all this stuff, and slow and steady, right? Slow and steady. I trust that you verified your connectivity, which was part of an earlier assignment. All right, I'll wrap up this video and then we'll be ready to continue on. If you look at this week's projects, it looks like we're installing DNS and DHCP and maybe something else, and so we'll get after that. That'll be a little bit more familiar to you, because you have done that in some of your earlier projects that were right out of the textbook. And I'd also mention to you that your textbook can be a great resource, because I'm going to be limited since we've already taught you about installing those roles, DNS, DHCP, and so on. I'm going to keep my comments brief and just do some spot checks with you, and turn you loose to be able to deploy those services and configure them on your own. All right, thank you for your time on this one, and we'll wrap it up and we'll continue on then and start building some infrastructure to our virtual environment.